Okay, so just before we get this podcast started, I just wanted to let you know, listeners old and new, that Galene is running its biggest summer giveaway ever. I mean, like, we've done a few before, but this is on another level. So the prize specifically is to be announced later this week. We're super excited to let you know what we're actually doing, but we're giving you a little teaser that it's all happening now. To sign up and get yourself involved, because I cannot tell you how much you're going to want to do this, is you need to follow us on Instagram and fill out a little questionnaire which is linked in our bio, and just answer a few little self-care related questions, and that is literally it. You might want to wait till you know what the prize is. That's totally fair, but I kind of have a feeling you're going to want to put that little questionnaire in, put your little name in the hat, because it's really, really good. All the info with a little bit more of a deep dive into it is on our socials, on our website. This summer giveaway, guys. Genuinely think it's going to be amazing. Let's get to it. The Galene Woman gets real and honest about her self-care. Hi, I'm Cole, and this is the Galene Woman podcast, our season 2, which I am genuinely so excited for. But I wanted to start us off a little bit differently this time. This season has a very, very different vibe, and I'm very, very excited to start it with you all. But before I dive into literally anything self-care related, of course, the general requirements for listening to this podcast is that you're using this time just for you. So either put your feet up, go make that cup of tea. Since this is released on a Sunday, the holy day of self-care, maybe go crack out those face masks, those feet masks. Yep, they exist. Or maybe even eye masks. That might be quite a good one, because you deserve to give yourself a very, very lovely 20 minutes of rest. You ready? Okay, cool. Let's get into this. I'm gonna be real honest with you guys. I'm really, really nervous for this season. Last season, I really, really wanted to focus on kind of more actionable steps, and advice that you could actually use, because I feel like the online space for all things described as self-care is very, very fluffy. It's very, very difficult to implement, and it can kind of feel like you have to start 70 million different habits at once to actually be able to engage with it, which is just not true. So I really want to open up the conversation to something that is actionable and that is, completely viable for somebody living a totally normal life, the average Joe, all that jazz. However, that was last season. Those little actionable tips, those little fun things you can do to include in your self-care routines is a thing of the past now, because I want to open up a little bit of a different conversation. I really feel like I want to get into why I actually started this whole thing, Galene Company, in the first place. I want to talk about real life. I want to talk about and talk with real people, because I think as much as everything we discussed last season is incredibly important and are the self-care essentials, and definitely the ways you can really start to implement what self-care looks like for you, I do think that the problems and the conversations that we need to have about why you need to do those things in the first place are really important. So we're kind of taking a bit of a step back, maybe taking a wider look at the bigger picture of why I think self-care and taking a rest and taking a break has actually become something that's really, really, really important. But yeah, gonna be totally honest, actually really, really do not find filming myself for content, filming myself for this podcast. This is why I've yet to broach YouTube and kind of having a camera sat in front of me as a thing that I want to do, because I am actually terrified. It's so strange because we live in a world that is obviously permanently online, and I'm so used to seeing so many of my favorite content creators show their face, put themselves out there, but I really just don't think that there is a discussion about the fact that that's really uncomfortable. Not because it's not because I'm like scared. I think it's just like I don't find it natural. I don't find having a camera sitting and watching me do my everyday life something that is normal to me at all. Perhaps it will be something I get used to, but right here, right now, not the vibe. However, I want to push myself. I want to push myself so I can actually give all of you the reassurance that you're not alone. The world not wanting you to take a break is actually very much a real thing that affects basically every woman I know. And therefore, self-care and promoting self-care has got to be something that somebody does. So I volunteer as tribute. I'll do it. That's fine. I am so happy to do it. But this is pushing me. So I wanted to let you know that. I'm going to start this with a comment that perhaps doesn't surprise anyone. That is, I have always been a perfectionist, which does not bode well for somebody that promotes relaxation. And I've always been surrounded by perfectionists in my life. I think that's something that's actually I've become more and more aware of as I've got older, is that a lot of my friends, members of my family, even extended people in my life have always had that perfectionist tendency. There was always this rhetoric, not just in my family, as I say, but my friends, my teachers, everywhere, that the harder I worked, the more I commit and give myself to something, the more I should technically get back, and that was what was expected of me. And perhaps, unsurprisingly, this made me one of those people that always had to be doing something, otherwise it felt like I was failing. Like there was always more I could add to the work I was doing, whether that was university work, whether or not that was Galene work, whether or not that was something in my personal life, in my relationships, giving in my relationships, not just familial and friendship, but also like romantic relationships as well. There was always this kind of idea in my head that I give more, I work hard, and it will pay off. And there is an element of truth in that, but it took me a long time to realize why this was such a damaging issue for me. Because when you grow up in an environment like that, the problem, unsurprisingly, isn't always obvious, even if it is on the tip of your nose. But I remember very specifically reading a book a long time ago now, like very long time ago, called Daring Greatly, which was by Brene Brown. It's one of those like classic self-help books. I think I just pulled it off because, you know, I'd had a really, really bad year. You know, a lot of things had happened in my personal life and in my professional life too. You know, my work and all this kind of jazz had not been going very well, and I was really, really struggling. And I was flicking through it. I was reading the sections that were relevant to me. I really do recommend this, by the way. Brene Brown is incredible. As much as people don't always love a self-help book, there are really, really incredible passages in it. And she has this one on perfectionism and how it's linked to shame. And genuinely, it completely flipped my perception of myself, the way I relate to others, the way I view everything that I do. And you know, at that particular point, I was kind of thinking more about my university stuff, even though there were so many other things it related to. But to kind of give you a bit of an idea, I had just resat my exams, even though I got 2 A stars and 2 Bs, because the 2 Bs weren't good enough. Do you know what I mean? I feel like when I read Brene Brown's passage on shame and perfectionism, and I thought about the fact that that's what I had just done, I just burst into tears. I was like, oh my God, I have never given myself the space to flippin' breathe. And it was like revelationary. And I genuinely, I don't even know if that's a word. Revelationary. Someone look that up. Let me know. But I genuinely don't think I have ever put that level of pressure to succeed in my university work specifically. Other elements of my life maybe not, but specifically when it comes to my academics, I definitely found myself taking a step back and always reflecting on that passage because it was just incredible. So that's my recommendation. But I do also think there's another angle to this, and especially since that point of reading Brene Brown and since kind of exploring what productivity meant to me and what rest meant to me as well, I kind of realized that I wasn't the only person buying into this, unsurprisingly, but the people that were basically all the women in my life. Like, all of them seem to be buying into this idea that the harder we work and the more that we commit, the more productive and useful we are, the better the outcome will be and the more acceptance there will be of who we are, which is insane in itself. But so many, countless women in my life who are in my life now and who aren't, very much subscribe to that idea, and it's kind of crazy. It felt very much like, and I don't know, maybe you don't relate to this, but I'm feeling you might do, that it feels like we're being told that our productivity was the only thing that made us useful. Like, we can't be lazy because, and we can't be seen to take our time. We always had to be full steam ahead. And that goes across a multifaceted situation. It doesn't have to be just like physical work. But because, let's face it, it's a multi-generational issue. My mum, my grandma, my friends' mums, my teachers, any woman in person, online, everywhere. I see it permeate us all through so many different things, whether or not that's related to our children, whether that's related to our husbands, boyfriends, kids, grandkids, our teams, our life. In every flipping aspect, something is wrong if we are taking our time with it. I had a recent chat with my therapist about like what actually made me start Galene, and it was this idea that immediately came to my mind, because it's that multi-generational problem for women that we just don't seem to be able to catch a breath. That there's something inherently wrong with that. I read an article recently about a lot of women, especially in their like really early as well, at like 25, feeling like they have to justify to everybody in their life why they don't have kids and what they're doing that is productive to justify who they are as a person, which is insane, because that means that a woman choosing to live a peaceful life in any possible way and not dedicate herself to something that pushes the boundaries and is super impressive or super worthy of love and respect is not allowed, is wrong, is kind of almost demonized in a way, I feel. And it's obviously definitely heavily on that kid stuff too, but I feel like career women must feel that so strongly as well, that they're defining who they are by the level of work they have. And I could literally sit for hours going through all the different examples of the way in which women justify working incredibly hard and not giving themselves a break. So this kind of leads me on to what I want to spend this episode talking about, because as much as justifying rest is something that I think is completely ridiculous. You don't need to justify why you're resting. You're resting because it's a natural human being thing to do, and we all need that time away and we all need that break. I actually wanted to spend this episode talking about 4 things that I actually really struggle with when it comes to self-care and rest, and why I think they are so related to that, as I say, multi-generational problem of not being allowed to take rest. And the little things that I fall back on, they're always the same, literally always the same, that make it feel really, really hard to take rest and, kind of explore that other side, really. That's really what I wanted to do here, was talk about all the different things that make self-care something that feels hard to do. Because I kind of feel like sometimes, especially on the Galene social media, I give the impression that this is something I don't struggle with myself, or that my team doesn't struggle with, or that you should find easy to do. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. But I really want to explore the reasons why we struggle with it, and explore the reasons why I struggle with it personally, to see if we can use those as almost a springboard as to how we can not solve the issue, but work with the things we struggle with to allow ourselves to do self-care and allow ourselves to take rest and a break. There we go. That's the summary of this one. But I will be honest, having Galene and having this little podcast and having all of you guys listen genuinely really reminds me to live by my words. So as much as the things I'm about to say absolutely affect me every single time I come to take a break. I come to give myself the space to breathe and live and not have to justify everything I do. Doing this is kind of working a little bit like my antidote at the moment. So yeah, gotta live true to my words, as they say. The first thing that I really want to talk about that makes rest and self-care difficult in my life, and perhaps this is a little unsurprising, is I have always had to battle to let myself relax. It's that permanent paradox of feeling guilty when I'm chilling out, when I'm not doing anything productive and I'm just sat watching a movie, or I'm reading a book, or, you know, I'm literally just sitting and eating dinner sometimes like that. You know, I can give myself grief for all of it. But then I'm also sad and annoyed when I work too much. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm sad and I'm stressed when I know I have a really, really busy day, but then I can't let myself not have a busy day because then the rest doesn't. Do you know what I mean? Like, I haven't justified in my head, if I don't have the busy day, I can't sit and chill. But even when I'm sitting and chilling, I'm sitting there thinking, I could have done more. It's like that horrible cycle that you just kind of end up thinking about over and over and over again. I will be 100% honest. Going to Cambridge, I go to Cambridge University. I guess I perhaps should have phrased it that way. I don't know. But going to Cambridge absolutely does not help with any of this. And I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. It's one of those environments that I can imagine that this is probably the same for any high level, high pressure university or higher education institution. Like, I have spent the past 2 years being given essays on topics that I have never come across ever before, given a reading list of like 20 books, and I'm expected to read as much as I possibly can, write for that like 3,000 word essay and talk about it in a week. And while that may not sound like a lot of steps, that's a hell of a lot of things to do in a very short amount of time and still live your life. So when everyone is kind of living in that bubble of, it's a Sunday, of course everybody's in the library, it's a Saturday, of course everybody's in the library, like, it can be very, 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 very difficult to justify taking some rest because nobody else around you is. And that's so, so, so hard. So when I have this loop in my head that I was talking about, of that battle, letting myself relax, I have this added pressure of all of my friends being in the library or studying, or literally even in just coffee shops like around town. Like, Cambridge is a small city, for those of you who have never been. You are going to run into everyone and anyone at any point during your day, and I can guarantee that during term time they're working. It's like there's no off button, and that is how it is for 8-9 weeks. And, you know, there's no questioning of how negative that can be for your mental health. Don't get me wrong, I'm very glad to be at Cambridge. I'm very, very, very grateful, and I knew what I was signing up for. But the point I'm trying to make is that your environment absolutely will make anything you are struggling with 10 times worse if it doesn't support it. Do you know what I mean? And now I have Galene. Like, doing Galene alongside Cambridge has made this even more like hard to balance, because how on earth do I give myself a break, rest properly, live in a peaceful and mindful way, and be productive and get my deadlines and achieve the things I want to do? It does feel sometimes like a little bit of an impossible task, but of course it's not. I do have my little things that have really, really helped me get through being at university and being in this environment. Especially, I would say my biggest one is actually my evening routines. I am pretty religious about the way I go to bed. Feels a very silly thing to say, but, you know, I always journal. I always do my skincare. I always spend that half an hour, 45 minutes before I actually get into bed doing things which I find extremely calming, reading as well. None of which are particularly difficult or particularly straining. I feel like self-care always has this association of like it has to be 10 steps and takes 4 hours, and you need to go to bed at 9 p.m. And that's not true. I don't go to bed at 9 p.m, but maybe 10 p.m, I don't know. But what actually has kept me grounded in those moments where I've been struggling to give myself a break is having a very stable and restful oriented, I don't know if that's a possible phrase we'll go with, evening routine, because it means I know for a fact that there is half an hour in my day, even though it is just before I go to bed, where I am absolutely prioritizing my downtime and my rest and feeling calm. I dip in and out of meditation. It's something I have had long periods of time where I do it, and then times where I don't. It kind of depends on what's going on in my life as to whether or not I feel like I need it, but it's definitely something that's helpful. And also another way I really start to include, or consciously start to include, self-care and kind of try and counteract that cycle in my head of I need rest, but rest makes me guilty, is how often I say yes and how often I say no to social plans. As I am sure you can imagine, being a university student, there is always, absolutely always, something going on and something that people do. I am very lucky that I have lots of little pockets of friends across the university, as well as kind of my like core group, and it means that there is every night of the week there is something going on. However, I am learning, I'm still struggling sometimes, but I am learning that sometimes saying yes is actually part of my self-care. Going and hanging out with my friends should be a fulfilling, fun, exciting, chilled experience, and saying no when knowing when that is actually more important, that I spend some alone time, and that my self-care at that particular point is sitting and watching a movie, which, who doesn't want to do that on a Friday night? But it's that idea of always having something beyond my work, which has meant that cycle that I go through of what makes me feel guilty about taking my rest is slightly less impactful than it would be if I did just say yes to everything, try and do all of my work, and then just burn out, because that's ultimately what's going to end up happening. The second thing that I would say that makes me struggle with certain elements of my self-care is this concept of staying healthy. And I'll kind of elaborate on it because I think it's perhaps slightly indirect, but it definitely impacts my ability to sit and just chill out, because I'll be thinking about the healthy side of things. So what do I mean about staying healthy? So for me, I definitely have health anxiety, which is definitely derived from some very personal experiences I've had across my life. I wouldn't say that it's in the sense of I need to be skinny or that I need to be this, that, and the other. It's very much to do with my overall health. This is kind of a dampener on the mood. But when I was 19, my dad passed away from a heart attack that was the result of living unhealthily, shall we say. And it's meant that this whole idea of balanced whole foods, including exercise into my life, and not consuming things that aren't good for me is such a source of stress. And it's kind of an underlying thing. I wouldn't say it's at the forefront of my mind all the time, but it really does impact my ability to chill out, because when I'm resting, I don't know, because there is such an association in my head with it making me lazy, that I'm suddenly going to become and do the things that I know aren't good for me. So eating badly, and I mean really badly, lots and lots of takeout and lots of chocolate, and never exercising, and just, things that don't make me feel good, but also play into my health anxiety. So I am very, very aware of it. I'm very aware that it's a very irrational way of thinking that taking time to rest and calm down and do things that are not productive, are going to lead me into a life that is really unhealthy. But it is something that I find myself thinking about, and it's something I find myself contemplating a lot of, how do I get this right? And it makes, ironically, my self-care so much more vital, because it gives me the space to actually check in with myself and be calm and look at how I'm living, and what I'm eating and how much exercise I'm getting, and acknowledge that I am doing it normally, and I am usually, giving myself the space to enjoy life and enjoy the little things, but also look after myself. So it's one of these weird kind of, I'm still deciphering the best way to manage it and how it impacts my time and my self-care, and what my self-care is supposed to look like and what it actually is, because it is definitely entrenched in some pretty deep shit. Apologies for that, but it's very true. And it can make self-care really hard, because self-care is about taking that time and prioritizing myself, and prioritizing myself in a restful way. And that isn't always totally aligned with the healthy fitness aesthetic that we are told is what we should be doing all the time. So yeah, that's a complicated one. It's definitely one I'm working on and I'm thinking about and I'm talking through with all the right peoples. But I definitely think I'm probably not the only one that thinks or has that thought of being lazy, sitting around makes me a bum, is going to mean that I eat gross food and I'm not exercising and I'm not, looking after my body, XYZ, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, if that's something you go through, you're not alone. I would say the third thing that kind of affects my self-care is definitely related to the first one, but is more specific to an experience that I've had out of college and also university, and that is burnout. The wonderful word burnout. We hear it all the time. It's everywhere. People think they have burnout on the smallest little of things, but I am talking about genuine, can't get out of bed. I am so flippin' exhausted. I don't know what I've just put myself through kind of burnout. For me, the anxiety around getting burnout and also going through burnout is pretty crazy. My late teens, guys, really was not my high era. We'll be honest, it was not. Cole was not thriving, but yeah, in college I definitely experienced burnout. I experienced it in a way that was very general, that every element of my life was stressing me out. My friendships, my family situation, my schoolwork, getting into university was such a big thing, of course, I'm sure you can imagine, and all this kind of jazz. So I was constantly on the move, constantly doing something, and I pushed myself way too hard. There was also the other underlying thing which was going on at that point in my life, which was my PMDD. If you want to know more about that, there's an episode last season where I go into what PMDD is. But that was definitely a huge factor that I overlooked for a very, very long time. And because it's such a mood swing based thing, up, down, really, really up and down over the month following your cycle, it meant that I was working through periods and pushing myself through periods where I absolutely shouldn't have been. And I should have been giving myself the rest and I should have been taking some time. And it led to my burnout, and picking yourself back up after, a really, really intense period is so much more difficult when you haven't given yourself any sort of rest during that intense period of time. I'm sure this is something that you personally understand. I definitely don't doubt it, because the weight is so much more after burnout or during burnout than any other period. I am very, very lucky that I kind of only experienced what I would describe as a moderate PMDD. I was not given any very extreme options when it comes to dealing with my symptoms. I was put on sertraline, or I asked for sertraline more specifically, and it meant that my management of my moods was so much better, and that experiencing burnout wasn't as intense because I wasn't going through it as much as I was, because I wasn't pushing myself through periods of time where I was struggling to even get out of bed. Like, it was very similar to the first one in that it was cyclical, and I would go through these intense productivity periods and then I would absolutely crash. But my PMDD was very much a big part of that. So I definitely have anxiety about having that again, which makes me stressed about taking time off and like not taking time off, which I think is incredibly ironic. But I guess getting anxiety about having anxiety is a very real thing, and I'm sure many people understand what that is. So yeah, I would say the third one is definitely my experiences with PMDD and burnout. It can really, really make taking restful time not only super important, but super, super stressful if I don't. So it's a weird paradox, but life is life on that, unfortunately. The fourth and final thing that very much makes rest something difficult, and I don't think there is a single person out there now that doesn't have this, is social media, my online presence. There is a bit of irony in this because I run a company that is online. I really, truly do believe our perception of what restful time is has been absolutely distorted by our need to constantly be looking at our phones or at our laptops, at any sort of screen ever, checking likes, who's seen what, who's liked what stories are going on, who's where, what are they doing, what you're choosing to post, what you're choosing not to post, what does your feed look like, blah, 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 what does your personal profile look like, who's succeeding, who's failing, blah, 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 blah. Like, there's 1,000,001 things on social media that you can be checking and looking at and constantly engaging with, and turning that off is so hard. Like, if we all think about it, when you come to take a break, the first thing I think the majority of us do is pick up our phones. Like, I am absolutely on that struggle bus, don't get me wrong. Like, when I'm taking a break from studying or from working on Galene, like, the first thing I will probably do is pick up my phone and see what else is going on out in the world. And now, yeah, it can count as a break, I guess, but like, it's not a restful break. It's just changing the activity, and engaging on social media around everything that's going on and everything that's buzzing is nowhere near restful. None of us are sitting here and thinking that scrolling for hours is good for our brains, so we need an alternative. I genuinely do think this is something I'm so much better at now I'm running Galene, because I'm so conscious of what my breaks look like. As I say, don't get me wrong, I still do it, but when I plan my time and when I'm thinking about my lunch breaks and, the other restful points in my day, other than just a quick 5-minute break, I do make a point of coming away from a screen, or if I'm watching a screen, not having my phone near me. If I'm watching a film or TV, like, what the hell was that? If I'm watching TV, or if I'm watching a show, that I don't have my phone and I can actually pay attention, so my attention span isn't as useless as it feels like it is right now. But I am definitely much more comfortable now with taking a break, even though those little nagging habits of picking it up on my 5-minute breaks is definitely still there. I am quite good actually logging off of Instagram, of distancing myself from all of those opinions, all of those things, checking people's accounts that you shouldn't be checking, XYZ. Yeah, I think I am getting better at it, but it's still something I struggle with, and it's still something I wanted to mention because I know so many of us do that and feel like it's a real problem because they don't know how to turn it off. So we're going to work through some ways we can come away from the phones. And I am going to implement them myself. Giving myself a break throughout the years has genuinely been one of the hardest things I've ever done. Actually learning what that is, battling against the things that I've just described to you, and the wider social issues of women taking breaks has been something that I constantly think about and I'm constantly aware of, because it's so overlooked as something that we should be talking about, especially for women. I know this problem does affect men, I'm very aware, but like from a female perspective, it's so inherently tied to us being productive and useful members of society that it really should be spoken about and thought about more. But honestly, even just encouraging other people to rest is really, really hard. How do you encourage people to be thinking about their peace, their rest, their taking a break time, when the only ways to do that is online? It is really one of the most difficult things I've ever given myself to do. But it's also a personal experience, as I say. Phrases like just relax, chill out, or it's not that deep suddenly have like way more weight to them, because I'm so conscious of how that makes us view our lives and what is worthy in our lives. And, you know, we deserve to feel like just relax is a positive thing. You know, that's why self-care took on way more importance than I ever thought it would in my life. Self-care in itself is such a weird phrase because, you know, now it implies indulgence, luxury, guilty pleasure, something that's almost commodified, that only elite few can access its benefits because you need all of these different things to do it. And yet, for me, self-care in its literal form, like its meaning at its root, describes the action of doing something consciously for yourself in order to support your well-being. You know, we don't really have any other phrases to describe it, and, you know, it makes it very difficult for people to navigate what self-care looks like for them now. So, what are we really left with in terms of phrases? Not a lot. And that is why I think we need to do a little bit of reclaiming here, particularly for those of us who've never felt like self-care is something for us, that's allowed for us. And yeah, I think it's hella important. This season of Galene, I really, really, really want to have those conversations around our struggles, around what rest really is for us. And I want to do it with the women in my life who have needed a break and not been allowed one, or are growing up with the exact phrases of you need to be productive or you're useless. I have so many people I'm excited to talk to, and although you have never met them, I certainly have, and I think they're pretty cool. So, and I think you're going to like them too. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to actually have a look at it from the ground up. These aren't famous people. These aren't celebrities. These are people who actually live in the real world and deal with real life problems. And, you know, they're not going to be here every week, but they're going to be here enough to really, really, really engage us in a conversation that I think is going to change the way we look at self-care and rest. Not having self-care in our lives means sacrificing not only our rest, but also our health. And that is something else that is not prioritized, especially for women. But boy, we're going to talk about that at another point. We have started at Galene, our little team have started a Q&A box, because I genuinely think we can have the conversations you want to hear about self-care, your worries, your doubts, everything in between around what self-care is supposed to be, that it is fun and that it is enjoyable and that it is most of all relaxing. It's linked in all of our social media. So if you want to join us in these little conversations, send us in those questions, send us in your thoughts. We're going to talk about them. I'm going to sit here and have a chit chat with you about it too. It's going to be great. I'm really, 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 really excited for this season. I hope you had the opportunity to take this podcast episode this time just for yourself and that this little bit of self-care has eased your day. Make sure to find some time soon if you didn't get the chance, because honestly, switching off from the world will do you wonders and you absolutely deserve it. There are about 1 million resources on our website, just letting you know, to get started on your little self-care journey. And that does include all the fun, exciting pieces. It's not all the serious stuff, but everything is there. Go check it out. www.galenecompany.com. have a look, see what you can find. I genuinely think it'll be so helpful if you're starting your self-care journey. The next episode, dun, 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 will be announced on Friday on our Instagram at GalenCompany_. And we do also have a weekly self-care tea. Our little newsletter is also available to keep your self-care inspired and wonderful and full of things that genuinely make you feel good and restful. I really, really, really hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode and that you realize you're not alone. There's a lot of things. Even a person who is running a company around self-care struggles with self-care. But until next time, my darlings, I can only suggest that you take care of yourself because you deserve it.